a multitude of things. He just got an award today by the Assembly for all the work he does with veterans.
Okay, and so I guess we're going to be talking about largely about the work that he does on behalf of veterans.
Yeah, and I want to ask him about his Republican stance about, what he feel about Trump, because I think he's a Trump supporter.
Okay. Well, that should make for a very,
Interesting conversation.
yes, very interesting. So, in the meantime, perhaps it's a good time for us to do a little review of the week's events. Lorraine, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I got some really cool news. Remember Omi, the gentleman that has
Omi
NF2? Yeah, Omi Medina has NF2, and his son is 7 years old, and his son ever since he was 3 has been wearing a police uniform, and to the point where the cops call him on a regular basis. The YPD calls him on a regular basis, and he's gotten a YPD patch too from an officer. And Omi Senior is deteriorating pretty quickly, and the thing that keeps him going is the fact that he says that he wants to live to see his son become an officer, and his son's dream is to one day become an officer. So I worked closely with the Yonkers Police Department this last couple of weeks, and on the 16th, Omi and his father I'm going to drop them off at the Community Affairs Division, not YPD Community Affairs Division, and little Omi is going to be a cop for a day. So both of their dreams are going to come true. His father's going to be able to see his son become a cop. And it's just a heartwarming story. It just makes me want to cry. And they're going to be riding with 2 officers the entire day. They're going to go to all the police precincts. They're going to go to a crime scene. They're going to go to the K-9 unit. They're going to go to the commissioner's office and meet the police commissioner. They've got an amazing emergency services too. They've got an amazing day, laid out for them. And I'm just grateful to the Yonkers Police Department, Commissioner Gardner and Sergeant Singer, who worked really close with me and made this. It's gonna make this a reality.
Okay, wonderful. That sounds like a great effort on the part of the Yonkers NYPD.
Yes.
I'll just say as a parent, I've often, and I'm sure all of us parents out here have often had to pause for a moment and think about, what life is going to be like for our children when we're departed. And a lot of us have anxieties that they will not be able to fulfill some of their life's dreams and ambitions. And so it really is a nice gesture on the part of the Yonkers Police Department to allow Omi to realize one of his dreams by seeing his son realize some of his early ambitions. So in that sense, I think they're to be applauded.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I want to remind all of our listeners who are tuned in that you can call into the studio. I think we can call into the studio, right? Yes. And the telephone number is 914-969-6499. Again, that's 914-969-6499. Please give us a call, share your comments, thoughts about important events in the city of Mount Vernon and throughout Westchester County, if not across the nation. So anything else? What other
AJ sends his regards to everybody. He will probably be calling, and I'm sure he's listening. Hi, AJ.
Brother Woodson, you can call if you like.
And so, we got primaries coming up. In September, September 13th. Virginia Perez announced that she's running against Andrea Stewart Cousins for Senate. Some people say that's a suicide mission. And yesterday, the entire County Board of Elections endorsed Andrea Stewart Cousins. All of Virginia's colleagues have endorsed Andrea Stewart Cousins yesterday. And the entire party and every elected official that's a Democrat and a Republican, they're not touching it. They're supporting Andrea.
Okay. Well, it sounds like Virginia has an uphill battle.
Well,
that
she
she's
thinks
gonna
she's
have to
got it
wait.
in the bag, but we'll see what happens.
Really, and
She
what?
really, really believes she's going to win. She got on the ballot. She didn't get kicked off.
Okay, I guess that's an achievement, an accomplishment. What we'll see. I mean, I don't know enough about Virginia's voting record to weigh in one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I have no intention on voting for her in the upcoming primary, but I will say that I think it's very important that everyone do get out and vote. This is one of those critical election years, and so I hope everyone makes gets to the ballot box and votes for somebody.
Yes. We got Luis Cherico, Wanda London. Hey, Wanda, my sis. Mira Danielle tuned in.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody. Luis Cherico, who is she? She, as in, who is she? Who are you referring to when you ask who is she? And yes, Wanda London, that was a very, very nice of the YPD to do, because I don't think I've ever seen them do anything to that extremish. Is that a word, extremish?
It is for the purpose of the show. Yeah, it is.
I have to go towards my dictionary to find out. And you are my dictionary, Dr. Bob.
Okay, I mean, I'm glad I could be of some use. I can't seem to log in. Can you pull that up on my Facebook page
Yeah.
for a minute, please? Is there any other important news that needs to be discussed from this past week?
There was a big raid in the Mount Vernon yesterday. Nobody knows anything about it because it's mysterious. There was a big boom, a window, somebody's car window was blown out. FBI, 2 people were being chased. FBI was there. Mount Vernon Police Department was there, but they're not talking. Nobody's talking.
Well, I did read reports, whatever reports were available on the news, and then apparently Mount Vernon was the epicenter of some sort of major cell phone scam.
Yes, but I don't think that.
That's not it?
I don't
Okay.
think that was it. There you go.
Okay. It shows you how in touch I am with the latest happenings in the city of Mount Vernon. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was an FBI raid.
It was an FBI raid, yeah. If anybody knows. Oh, the person running against Andrea, the senator. The person running against the senator is Virginia Perez. She's a county legislator in the 17th Legislative District. She's sort of a renegade because she crossed over and voted with the Republicans, and the Democratic Party has basically disavowed her. That's who she is, in a nutshell.
Okay. I want to give a shout out to Floyd Myers, who recently joined us. Want to check in. What's up, Floyd? Others.
Marvin Church.
Oh.
Hello, sir. How are you? Louise said it's very important to note that September 13th is on a Thursday. People, please remember it's on a Thursday, not on a Tuesday like it usually is. This year it's on a Thursday. I don't know why. You're welcome. Thank you. Ken Bright just joined. Atif Khalil. Hey, Atif.
Atif, what's up, Atif? Brother Bright, what's good? Thank y'all for joining us this evening.
So we have Nader Sayegh coming in. I believe he's coming in at 6. I think it was 6:30. I believe it was 6:30 because Anthony Mele is coming in at 7. So for right now, me and you, we got this, Bob. Let's.
All right. Well, our online viewers are going to give us some direction by offering their comments. One thing that I think is a topic that continue to get a lot of discussion early this past week was the fallout from the shutdown of Cupcake Cuties, and all of the controversies surrounding the Thomas administration. As it turns out, actually, I ran into Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, on Monday, and well, she was. Let's say she had heard about the mayor's decision to accept Damon's invitation for the charity box off, and you know.
What'd she say? Start laughing at me.
She wondered how he had come to a rational conclusion that was the good and advisable thing to do.
The mayor accepting it.
Yes.
Oh. Well, he doesn't want to fight anymore. He wants to play Nintendo.
Right. I mean, let me say this, everyone, that I've had discussions with some very close friends about whether or not the invitation was appropriate and whether this depicts Mount Vernon in a bad light, because it's very unusual for an elected official, the municipality's top elected official, to be called out so publicly. You know, and I just want to say, there's a couple of things I want to say. A, I cannot overstate the seriousness of the mayor's breach of procedures, administrative procedures, regarding shutting down a business for violations of the building code or for some other codes. Let me just say that, you know, this is a part of a repeated pattern. The mayor should not have had Cupcake Cuties shut down unless he followed the proper procedures, and he didn't. And one of those procedures is a 30-day notice. So the mayor really has continued to act in a very self-destructive way and really set himself up for the kind of conflict that he has gotten himself in for with Damon. That's number one. Number two, you know, Mayor Thomas is the mayor of the city of Mount Vernon. He can deign, he can stoop to dignify remarks from those who are outside of the city government, or he cannot. And quite honestly, I think the mayor should have just simply, if he wanted this controversy to die down, he should have just simply not commented on it, the invitation at all. But he was foolish enough, I think, to publicly accept on air a challenge. And in that sense, if there is any loss of dignity for the office of the city, of mayor of the city of Mount Vernon, or for Mayor Thomas himself, is of his own doing, like so many of the other problems that he's experienced. Yeah, I just had to put that out there. I'm sure everyone is aware of the news. I think that this came down this past week.
What happened?
That Representative Gary Pretlow, state legislator from the city of representing the city of Mount Vernon, announced that he had secured a $5 million grant from the state, and in a public letter that was printed in Lohud and others, he also made it very clear that his position is that the money should not be deposited directly with the city of Mount Vernon. Instead, if the state is going to grant the city the money, that the money is going to go
to the county.
Yeah, to the county, which is another way of saying that Rich needs to get on board. The train has left the station. There seems to be a consensus between most of the most pertinent state, county, and city officials.
Between everybody but Rich.
Everybody but Rich. So I hope the mayor reconsiders his intransigence, his refusal to work with anyone, and recognizes that it is in the best interest of the city that there be a real power-sharing arrangement with the county in the lead of the renovation project, and that seems like a way forward. And who knows, Rich, if you actually act in a cooperative manner, maybe you'll get some credit for this when it's all said and done. In any case, those are my comments.
All right, our first guest is here today. But first, we want to acknowledge some of the people that are here. Floyd Myers, hello. Ken Bright, Alta Johnson, Atif Khalil, I already said. Denise Cardoza Branch. And anyone you might have. So, Nader, can you come in, Nader? Come on in. Hi.
All right, how are you today?
Good, nice to meet you. Nader
We've-
Sage.
We've met already. You came to my house a couple of weeks ago. You don't remember it anymore.
Hi.
I remember you.
You do.
What's the name? Tucson? Where was it?
Yes, absolutely. There you
There
go.
you go.
Was that good?
You remember now. Absolutely. Good to see
That
you.
is awesome.
Have a seat.
Yes,
You
yes,
can sit
please.
here if you like.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you a good friend of mine, somebody that's been a friend of mine for about 30 years now. Excellent educator and attorney at law. The person who has the Democratic nomination for the 90th Assembly District, which was the district that Shelley Meyer used to hold. Right now, he doesn't have a primary. He's going into the general election. And with that, I'm going to introduce Mr. Nader Sage.
I'm sorry. Before we proceed,
What happened?
I just wanted to. It was pointed out to me that I misspoke a few minutes ago and did not properly identify Gary Pretlow's position. I want to make clear that he is a state assemblyman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So thank you. And we can continue.
So, Nader, why are you running?
I'm running because I've been involved for 40 years in Yonkers, involved in politics. I consider myself a product to the community. I consider myself someone that understands Yonkers from nearly 40 years of involvement, having grown up on Waverly Street and Buena Vista Avenue in Southwest Yonkers. I'm a product of the public school system.
Mm-hmm.
And in light of the enormous issues before the school district and the children of Yonkers, especially the funding from the state,
Mm-hmm.
it really was the proper time and to really follow the footsteps of our state delegation, our state senators and assembly people that have represented us, and to really continue the fight and really bring Yonkers its fair share of funding. So these are issues that really are very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to taxes, in addition to small businesses, job development, healthcare. And I feel that myself and my family have been an integral part of Yonkers, New York for over 60 years now.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
I feel I'm not
They
only
can't hear you.
I feel I'm
Is
not
this
only
mic open?
deserving,
Okay.
but I feel
Thank
I'm
you.
the most qualified candidate, Lorraine.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you and I go back.
Way back.
Way back in the days of working in Southwest Yonkers
Mhm.
with Latino and African American organizations and trying to do whatever we could to give each child an opportunity to grow and prosper.
Now, the big question is that everyone, it seems to ask, any candidate, what are you going to do to secure funding? What can you do differently that anybody else hasn't tried? They still can't hear you.
No, AJ said that's much better. That's
Oh, AJ said that's much better. Hi, AJ.
speak one more time, Nader.
Hi, AJ. Nice to be on this show.
Floyd, do you hear Nader, Floyd?
Hello, testing 1 2. No, we can hear. You can hear me. Okay.
Okay. So what can you what are you going to do to secure funding that anybody else?
Sure. Lorraine, for some 30 years, I know and recall that Yonkers is a community, Board of Ed trustees, administration, especially public officials, have long taken the position that funding is a problem. And what we're told by Albany historically is Yonkers, you're part of a rich county, and therefore you don't deserve the type of funding the other big cities like Buffalo and New
Yeah.
York City and Rochester
Yeah.
and Syracuse. And I've already led a serious initiative to really get the state to recognize that the funding formula is wrong, because the funding formula that truly bases what we get per child, it's based on the wealth. And when we look at a school district like Yonkers, when some 80% of our children are on free and reduced lunch, where's the correlation between the wealth? Our kids and their parents don't own that property that's wealthy. What I propose, and I've made a point of elaborating that very clearly,
You
is-
basically have to put it like,
yeah,
close to
what
your
I
mouth.
propose is to have the federal government guidelines that is based on financial background that determines who gets free and reduced lunch. That should be the criteria that's based heavily in the formula. And also the number of special ed children, English language children, and these are populations that I've worked with for 40 years, whether as a school principal, as a classroom teacher, or as a Board of Ed trustee. I've dealt with high need population students, and I recognize the enormous amount of services that are required to have an equal playing field, to make sure that every child has the support they need and deserve. That funding formula, when I research that, Lorraine, it comes down to basic math, $5,000 a year less of state funding per Yonkers kid.
Wow.
This is 27,000 children we have, times $5,000 less of state funding amounts to nearly $45 million a year that we lose. And we lose
That's
that
a lot of
funding.
money.
That's a lot of money. That's why the formula is so unfair. For anybody that tells us don't waste your time, my main initiative among a lot of issues is to go up to Albany, bring the facts to them, and demand, whether it's bringing coalitions together, people from other urban settings, other parts of the state that have common concerns and needs, to realize that the way to address this is to have a statewide change in the formula. What they blame us year after year is, oh, we can't do something special for Yonkers. So we're forced to go to Albany, our PTA, our city administration, our parents and students. We lobby Albany. We go there year after year, and they make us feel like they're giving us a handout each year, which is a shame. They should fix the formula, and we told them up there, whether the budget department or the delegation members that are responsible in their committees, that give us our rightful share, and we'll never beg them for another dime again. We'll live within our means.
Nader, I was wondering if you could do me the favor, if not members of our audience, and just give us a little more background about what the current funding formula is so we can better understand how it leads to these kind of disparities.
The present funding formula, that it took a lot of time, by the way, to demand from the state, tell us what this formula is all about. And most people never understood it. But they base at least 50% of the formula on the wealth of the county you live in, about 25% on the number of students you serve, and about 25% is based on high needs population. So part of the formula, or part of the changes I am proposing, really amounts to making 50% at least of that formula, and base that on the federal guidelines of free and reduced lunch that are more reflective of the wealth of the students and their parents, and then look at it at least at 25% on high needs population. We all know as educators that to educate a special ed child or to educate an English language learner with ESL requires greater teaching time, support services, and other targeted instructional means, including Title I services. And the other 25%,
What are Title I services?
Title I is reading lab, federal government funds through Title I that allows
Okay.
children extra academic instruction in small group instruction, ESL, having a reading lab, a math lab, preparation for the state standardized testing.
Okay.
These are crucial services that our kids need.
Okay.
Okay, so the
Sure.
the formula that's currently used is based on the county's wealth, which
Largely.
is, or a considerable part, I should say. 50% of the funding need is based on the county's wealth, but the city of Yonkers, there are significant disparities in the amount of wealth that the county has as opposed to each of the individual municipalities. And I guess the city of Yonkers has one of the highest concentrations of people who are living in poverty and in economic
Correct.
straits. So you
No,
don't feel...
You got that right. That's why it really causes Yonkers an injustice. And what we're looking at also is a potential change of the status of Yonkers and take us out of Westchester County and the index that the state uses to determine wealth of property and so forth in Westchester, and tie us in more to parts of New York City and Queens, for example, that have a different formula. And our recommendation, and what people that understand what we're talking about are realizing, that in order to make it more fair, you got to tie in Yonkers to a similar economic standing. We're more similar to the Bronx. When you look at the population we serve in our public school system, we're more similar to the Bronx and Queens than we are to Tuckahoe and Eastchester and Scarsdale and Bronxville. That's where the injustice is.
Do you think that's even possible? That
I think so. I've already reached out to state delegation members. I've worked very closely with our state delegation that represents us, Senator Cousins and Senator Meyer now, and Assemblyman Gary Pretlow. And they've worked very hard, and they've worked hard to get a tremendous increase in funding over the years. But it's a big challenge because it's year after year we're going up there and lobbying for that funding. The formula is crucial. And for individuals that tell me, well, my kids are in private schools, I'm a homeowner, and I don't use the public schools, why is it important for me? And very simple, whenever Yonkers is shortchanged from the state with funding for our schools, the city has to kick in.
oh, the
The city.
taxpayers.
So therefore, when the taxpayers this past year saw over a 6% tax increases, they were very upset, and rightfully so. So my message is, the more funding we get that we're entitled to from the state, the less the need is to raise taxes. So it really impacts each and every person in our city.
Now, I mean, this would seem to make a lot of sense, and I'm curious, what are some of the major impediments that have prevented the state legislator from adopting reforms of the kind to the budgetary formula that you propose? Why the hold up? Why the opposition?
Because a large part of it, I mean, that's a good question, and it's been politics. Politics involving how upstate politics reacts to downstate politics, urban education to small school districts. This is why, as I stated earlier, that to change that formula, it needs to be a statewide change of formula. In the past, unfortunately, most of the emphasis on changing that was focused on a Yonkers formula or a solution for Yonkers. And the problem is, no matter how hard our present state delegation works, and they do a very efficient job, it's very difficult for them to rally the state assembly and senate members from other parts of the state. This is why the difference would be to lobby similar communities, as we stated earlier. For example, the Buffalo state senators and assemblymen, and the Rochester and the Syracuse, and even here in Westchester, you go to Ossining and you go to Peekskill and other neighborhoods, and New Rochelle and Mount Vernon and other communities that are similar to us. Their representatives that are up in Albany, I would reach out to them, and I would reach out to members of the Bronx delegation and have them on board with us to really build up a coalition. And I consider myself someone that has been a team member. I've always rallied at the school building level as a principal, teachers and parents and students working together. I will do the same thing in Albany. I will utilize my educational background and experience, my community activities. I would utilize my legal background as an attorney, to study the law, study the legislation, and truly reach out, that I'm very effective in reaching out to members of the delegations from throughout the state and begin to communicate to them a need to modify the formula. And people that say, well, it's impossible, nearly 2 weeks ago, Governor Murphy in New Jersey did an overhaul of the New Jersey state educational funding formula. And there was a recognition there that too many poor districts were not getting their rightful share of New Jersey state funding. So if New Jersey did it, what's the problem in New York? So for people that tell me, Nader, you know, you're embarking on something that's impossible, nonsense. This is very possible. Very recently, there was a major state in our neighborhood that changed its funding formula throughout the state, and there's no reason why we here in New York can't do the same.
Right. Also, you know, it seems to me that even though when we talk about underfunding of public education, very often we have in mind school districts that are largely have large minority enrollments. I know that there are many other upstate districts in New York that have large concentrations of poverty and are encountering very serious economic hardships of their own. And it would seem to me like those districts would represent natural allies that recognize that there is a need to rework the funding formula so that their kids, and here I'm talking about, these are probably kids, a good number of them who are white kids, are also in some of these upstate districts, are also receiving a subpar education.
And you're so right. I mean, you know, you hit the nail on the head. The issue impacts students of similar needs and concerns. And as you said, it's throughout the state. And this is why it's doable, it's crucial for Yonkers, it impacts our children. When we try to avoid layoffs year after year, and we work with our labor groups, and we try to make sure people can hold on to their careers and their jobs, and then we're given the threat of not only layoffs, but the potential loss of serious services we provide our children. Often, the first on the chopping block is subjects like music and art and recreational programs and support services, because they're not mandated. We're mandated as educators to make sure there's classroom teachers teaching our children. So whenever school districts, not only Yonkers, are forced to make cuts, they go after those unmandated services, but they're crucial services. So when our kids lose the opportunity to have ample music and art and library and physical education and sports program, that's a major tragedy for our kids. We've been able to restore a lot of these services. I've been a trustee now in my 6th year on the Board of Ed, totally a volunteer position. I spend nearly 20 hours a week of my time, and especially when I served 3 years as president of the Board of Trustees.
I was just going to say, you've been the chairman of the board,
the
president of the board.
For 3 years, and during that time,
while practicing law.
While practicing law, while raising a family.
That's pretty impressive.
And serving, of course, on my numerous other organizations that I've been involved with for many years. But the interesting point is, when I came on the Board of Trustees, as a simple fact, the graduation rate in Yonkers was about 70%, the high school graduation rate. This past school year, Yonkers had one of the highest graduation rates in the entire state, with 86%.
Wow.
86%. I mean, that is unseen.
Unheard of.
Not only in New York State, but on the national level. And what do we attribute to that to? We attribute that to a major focus on transparency. When I was president of the Board of Education, we demanded that the Board of Ed have committees for every function, for instructional affairs, for facilities, for policy, for community services, and encourage parents and educators to come and serve on these committees so that everybody has a voice. And when we look back and see what was done to develop transparency and consolidation of services. The intermunicipal agreement, they call it the IMA, was during my tenure on the board after the unfortunate situation of some $55 million mistake that was made by the finance people at the school district, at the city of Yonkers, at the state level. This was a problem where there was no misappropriation of funds. The problem was individuals relied on a pattern where the state lends money to communities and they have to pay it back. And they relied on 2 years of such loans when the loans were never really given or approved.
Oh, Jesus.
So it was during my tenure as board president that we tracked that down. We did financial accounting. We held people accountable and responsible, and we fixed the problem where now there's one finance system that the school district, city of Yonkers, working with the state. This way we know exactly what expenses, what revenue, what resources we have. That was a problem that was fixed. That was fixed during my tenure as board president. And today we have a system in place where year after year we're saving as much money as possible, providing as much services as possible, and getting positive results. As I said earlier, 86% graduation rate, something that I'm proud of, and I'm sure it's something to continue to build on.
Okay. I want to ask you a follow-up question, Nader, specifically about the need for a change in the funding formula. But before I do, I want to welcome County Legislator Lyndon Williams, who recently tuned in. He's a regular listener, and we always appreciate him joining us to have discussions about important political public affairs. Now, you said that you thought it was in the interest of the city of Yonkers and other municipalities that are under financial duress to seek an alternative funding formula. And because you said what it means is that it largely places the burden for financing the education system on local municipal homeowners. And it reminded me of the recent enactment of reforms at the federal level with regard to state and local tax, property taxes, so-called SALT taxes. And I'm curious to know if, my understanding is that some of these statutes were under challenge. I don't know their status right now. But should the state and local tax reductions that President Trump proposed be fully enacted, what is the impact going to be on New York taxpayers, and what will the ramifications be for funding of our public education system?
I think the ramifications are enormous. You got to realize Yonkers property owners that pay a large percentage of taxes, and they pay more for public education than other communities because of the lack of state funding. They rely on a tax system that's been imposed by the Trump administration that limits the amount of deductions for each homeowner to $10,000 a year. Now, a lot of taxpayers are paying anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 to $25,000 a year, especially that property owners that own a single family. And these individuals can no longer deduct their full mortgages and taxes. So they're limited to $10,000 that the Trump administration realizes, well, we feel that's a proper number. Maybe that's a proper number in Carolina and in the Midwest and other parts of the country. But in the Northeast, especially New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, where the property values are much higher, it really causes a serious problem. This is why New York State government is looking at initiatives to try to bypass or compromise what the Trump administration is doing. And we see this happening with many issues. For example, advocates of pro-choice, or advocates of, especially with the recent Supreme Court nomination of
Brett
Kavanaugh. There's a major concern now that New York State and the governor signed into legislation, whereas New York will go and protect the rights of individuals to abortions, for example, and to continue to have the pro-choice approaches that they want. Whereas with taxes, it's the same situation. The problem we have is that whenever the federal government initiates policies that are biased or unfair for states, especially New York State, it forces us, and I, as an assemblyman, I would work to make sure that any initiatives that protect us from the White House or Trump administration policies, that we undertake to protect us in whatever way we need to. So you're right, it's a serious problem, taxes. It forces more of a concern. Many individuals can't afford their homes. Many residents begin to move out of the community, and it becomes a problem where it impacts our children, impacts our tax base, and our ability to provide services for our students.
How do you feel about charter schools?
I'm against the concept of taking money that is designated to the public school system and to give it to any school. Now, it happens that chartered schools were established in districts that had poor results. And if you look at Buffalo and Syracuse and Rochester, they have so many more chartered schools than we do. We have in Yonkers one chartered school, and that's a credit to public education in Yonkers. Usually, the formation of new chartered school there's a correlation with poor results in public schools where parents want to send their kids to charter. I've made a point of saying chartered schools should reach out and get a whole separate funding source, preferably private funding, then that's fine. But to pit Yonkers residents against each other, public and chartered school, because any funds you put to chartered school take away from public, that's a serious problem. And when that happens, we in public education have to cancel sports programs and art and music, which again is very crucial. I am a public school advocate. I've been an educator in the Yonkers schools nearly 45 years with the Board of Ed now. My 5 daughters are all products of the public school. We're 8 brothers and sisters, and all of us are products of the public schools. Thank God we've done very well professionally, our careers, and that's largely to public education. So when I, as an attorney, as an educator, believe in due process and give each person an opportunity to be heard, that's a right every individual has. And if somebody mistakes my respect for due process and questions my support for public education, then they got it all very wrong. Again, I'm an advocate of public education. Anything that takes away a dime from public schools, I'm against.
Can I have a follow-up?
Yeah.
So, Nader, I'm myself am very skeptical of charter schools for a number of reasons, including their historical origin in opposition to desegregation of the U.S. public school system during the 1950s. I think it's very important that anyone who is considering the efficacy of charter school proposals be aware of the fact that it was largely advocated by segregationists who did not want to see children of color attending school alongside white kids. Now, having said that, so I think there are principal reasons to be opposed to charter schools. However, I do think that one criticism that advocates of charter schools are spot on with is the criticism that the public school system tends to insulate public schools against competitive pressures that would cause them to use funds more efficiently, deliver a quality education to our kids. And I think the only reason that we're having this conversation about charter school policy is largely because of the very spotty record of our public school systems. And I have to say, I am a public school educator. I teach at a college, a public college. So I am a big proponent.
Your colleagues.
Yes, we, in some respect, we are. That's another conversation.
Well, I taught college too, so we have a lot in common.
Right.
And you're right. People that question chartered school definitely question the makeup, the enrollment policy, the registration policy of chartered schools. And as public educators, we want to make sure that there's an equal playing field. So if I have a public school and I'm required to treat and enroll every child in an equitable fashion that walks through my doors, I would expect the chartered schools to do likewise, whether it's to make sure that there's an equitable racial breakdown of the population, or ethnicities, or even economic status, or even learning disabilities, for example, or English language learners. When we don't see that, and chartered schools or private schools focus on an enrollment policy that accepts only students that they feel would succeed, then that's an injustice. We as public educators educate every child that walks through our doors. So it becomes a little bit unfair when they compare data to say, well, my data is higher. Well, maybe you're not treating the same population and the same concerns and issues that we in public education do. So that's why it's a point well taken that there's many issues that show concern as to whether or not there's equity in chartered school. And of course, the funding issue is crucial. You know, our funding should be geared 100% to public education. With all the criticism that it has, it's the one best system. In my opinion, as a historian, as an educator, the one best system that has brought generations of immigrants and everybody else to give them an opportunity to succeed has been public education. So that's my advocacy, that's my support base, and this is my main initiative going to Albany, among many other issues, public funding, public education.
Let me just say we got a couple of other people tuned in. AJ it's tuned in.
Good evening, AJ.
Good evening, AJ. Dawn Seawright tuned in. Donna Jackson, Brian Harrod. Hey, Brian. Brian Harrod joined in. And Karen, my sister, Karen Edmondson. Karen DaCosta Edmondson just joined us, too. Now, Luis Cherico keeps saying that, let me just read what she says, because she said again, because she said it prior. She said, Yonkers homeowners send their kids to Catholic schools. They will always fight you until Spano improves the schools first. They don't care about the waterfront. Nobody does. They want the schools funded by the city first. I'm going to be, as a native, born and raised Yonkers gal, I'm going to have to disagree with that. Because, number one, Spano's working hard to improve the school system. Number two, we've got a couple of Catholic schools that have closed down because the folks cannot afford to send their kids to Catholic schools, and they're sending them to public schools. And yes, we do care about the waterfront, because when I was in the city council, I was one of the first city council members to vote on the waterfront, and it's a wonderful, wonderful new addition to the city of Yonkers. And anybody have any questions? Lyndon Williams said the Trump SALT policy that disallowed deductions for blue states like New York and California is the most partisan, backward-thinking policy of any president. Both Democrats and Republicans, New York and California, pay more taxes and bring more revenues to the federal budget than any other state. That was from County Legislator Lyndon Williams.
By the way, just Lorraine, you know, I have the pleasure of having attended Pace Law School with County Legislator Lyndon Williams.
Oh,
so,
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so a commonality there, and you know, welcome to the show, and always a pleasure to hear from you.
I also wanted to echo a comment of one of our viewers, Donna Jackson, who shared a link to a letter that was recently issued by the
Chancellor?
Yes, by the Chancellor's office, the Board of Regents, I believe. Hopefully I'm getting that part right. But the gist of the letter is that to express opposition to a recent proposal, I don't know if it's yet been passed, but I heard about it, that would allow the New York State Board of Regents to reduce the certification requirements for charter school teachers. And this would be part of a much broader pattern that you were alluding to, whereby the charter schools have an advantage over public schools that allow them to operate more efficiently and therefore give the appearance that they are providing a better quality of education. And this would be an example. As a college professor, I can tell you that, and someone who has a PhD, I had contemplated teaching in the public school system at a lower level, primary, secondary level, because actually it pays better than to teach at the college level, strangely enough.
You're right.
And funny enough,
He's right.
I found it very difficult to meet the qualifications because even though I had a PhD, there was certain coursework that I had to attend, I had to complete that I had in basically how to teach. And in addition, I had to pass certification in certain subject areas that are not a requirement of one's doctoral degree, just very different systems in that regard. But the idea that somehow or the other charter schools would be allowed to lower the bar in terms of the qualifications for newly admitted teachers, while the public schools will be required to maintain a very high bar, I think does both a disservice to charter school students and also to the taxpayers themselves, because again, it gives a very distorted picture of the outcome of these two different approaches to education.
You're right. See, we spoke about earlier about making sure there's proper playing field when you compare public education to chartered school, and that's another example. When the state allows chartered schools to lessen the requirement for higher and efficient staff members, that really causes a problem, you know, with the delivery of effective learning and teaching. And that's one of the main concerns. And plus, when chartered schools get a certain amount of money that from public education, and they don't have the similar expenses that we have, then that's another problem. Because if they're paying their teachers less, and we're paying more for our public schools teachers because they have their license, they have their credentials and qualifications, that is also wrong. So I think the concept that's being passed to the Board of Regents and to the governor's office and to the state delegation is, you know, to stop taking public school funding to compensate chartered schools. If chartered schools are allowed to operate, and we have many private schools, whether they're religious schools or chartered schools, let them operate, let them get their funding through tuition or through private donations, but don't impact and take away public education funds. Don't put yourself on the same playing field and claim that you're compatible to what public schools do when you can't do it. That's the main concern. So you're right on that point, and it's something that I know the state legislators have been echoing this message in Albany for years now, and now it's become even more important with the Commissioner of Education on the federal level that is a big advocate of chartered schools. And this really is an attack on public education, and this time more than ever, I think individuals at all levels need to stand up and protect the integrity of public education. As we said, it's the one best system.
And I want to stress to the audience, listeners, that it's not merely an attack on the delivery of an education that's going to allow future generations to enter into the middle class, but it's also very important for everyone to remember that the public education system is part of a larger system of civil service employment that really has been a ladder for the entrance of African Americans, Latinos, and people of color and other groups that have been largely marginalized from the American economy to enter into the middle class. The attack on big government as such, really in some respects, everyone, is a disguised attack on the very economic institutions that have given once excluded groups a loose toehold on middle class existence. Should we privatize? Should we go over to a model of education that largely seeks to privatize education? What that means is that more and more people who once taught in public schools that enjoyed lifetime tenure when they met the qualification, that enjoyed a robust system of due process, those things would be eliminated. And in this sense, the call for charter schools is very much in keeping with the effort to deunionize workplaces across the United States. And people need to be aware. So it's going to hit possibly not only future generations who may find that their resources have been drained away by charter schools, but it may hit current adult middle class professionals who went off to college in the hopes of becoming public school teachers and to enjoy a decent standard of living that comes with it, and may find themselves forced to teach in charter schools where there are no union protections. And my sense is that, you know, forget all of the rosy, you know, stories about charter schools. My sense is that a lot of the teaching staff and in charter schools is very deeply demoralized because of the very autocratic approach that's used there.
Well, you're right. Even you know, we spoke earlier about the impact of federal government and the Trump administration. The other area you pointed out is labor and unions, and the Janus decision that recently was brought down. You know, the politics behind that was to really begin to take shots to crush unionism in America.
Right.
And I think any individual that realizes the balance, the economic balance, and the need for America to promote more good paying jobs, and through unions, individuals that have good paying jobs that can depend on those jobs and remain in those jobs and have careers in those jobs their entire life till retirement, really puts them in a position where they can raise their families. And I, for one, would focus and believe and advocate for greater job growth than allowing and forcing people to go on government support. So when more people lose their jobs and they have to rely on government support, then the tax base goes up and the formula goes out of whack. So when we as educators put more programs in job development and the government initiates more job development, and yes, unionism, even though some people may have issues with unionism, it's one effective way that really allows for tenure, protects people in their jobs and careers, especially from intimidation and politics that took place many years ago, and allows an individual to buy a home and raise a family and rely on his or her career. That's important, and we're losing track of that. This is why the Janus decision is a terrible decision, and a lot of what's coming down from Washington is really very unprogressive. It's wrong, and it really is geared to destroying those institutions and those established presence that protect the working people and the working class. So that's another key initiative with the Janus decision. And again, I wanted just to say hello to Lyndon Williams, fellow classmate at Pace Law School, and him and I have a picture together with the many graduates from Pace in the court system and in government and politics, and we're glad to see that the Pace alumni base is growing. Lyndon, keep it up.
He said, Nader, great to see you, my friend.
Pleasure's mine.
Absolutely. I want to give a shout out to Tasha.
Tasha, honey
Yeah,
D.
Tasha just checked in, one of our stalwart comrades. Good to see you, Tasha.
So Nate, well, our next guest has already arrived, but let me ask you a question. If you were speaking to the voters, well, you are speaking to the voters, can you tell them why you think they should vote for you?
Sure. No, thank you very much, first of all, to Black Westchester, and it's an initiative that's extremely important, and it's a voice that allows individuals to really voice out their concerns and to be on the show. And I know, Lorraine, you've spoken about the many individuals and all aspects of government and services that appear on the show. That's really reflective and respect of the work your team does. and it's reflective of the need to express the message. And my message before the voters is that Nader Sayegh is the candidate for New York State Assembly. I have the endorsement of the Democrat Party,
Yes.
the Independence Party.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Cavallo gave you the
He gave me
endorsement?
the endorsement.
Okay.
I have the Reform Party, and I have the Women's Equality Party.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Tasha would be happy to hear
Yeah,
that.
so Women's Equality endorsed my candidacy. You know, we're working very hard. I believe that through the election of someone like myself, the voters can expect a person that knows the entire city of Yonkers, that knows the issues. I've been in Yonkers 60 plus years. I've been very entrenched in community services, primarily as a volunteer.
Your entire family has been.
My entire family in education and law and health care, the many voters out there that are seen or have medical doctors that are from my family,
Yes.
or teachers or educators that taught them, or lawyers that represented them on various matters. It's a family commitment that we've made to Yonkers. And
Yes,
it's a
yes.
volunteer record of 40
You're a
years.
prominent family in the city of Yonkers,
And
yes.
Lorraine, I've never earned a single dime in 40 years of service. It's because I care about the city. I have the educational background. I have the skills. I have the know-how to build teams and build coalitions. And I would be the individual that would go to Albany, work with our state delegation, and start working hard for our city and our students. I have those techniques, I have those skills, and I ask for the voters to not put their trust in individuals that just tell them what they think and what they feel, but individuals that have had the experience, the hands-on experience, and the ability to say, look, I've been there, I've done it, and I'll continue to do it with an aggressive approach. Not to sit back and have a learning experience for a year. The seat is already vacant because Shelley Mayer, our dear friend, is elected state senator. So we need to make sure that the individual that goes to Albany tackles the issue as soon as possible. It's not a long process. It would hurt us to have somebody go on job training up there to learn who to deal with and what to deal with. I've been to Albany. I've lobbied Albany for years on behalf of public education. I know the players. I know the departments. I would go to Albany and immediately start representing the best interest of Yonkers.
With that being said, are you willing to come back when AJ and Damon are here? Are you willing to come back to People Before Politics and sit down and have a conversation with your opinion?
It's my pleasure. You know, I've always welcomed effective communications and the opportunity to say what's on our minds, our views and opinions, and to give the voter an opportunity to hear it.
Now, Nader, how can people reach you if they want to contribute to your
Campaign, volunteer.
Yeah, or reach you on social media?
Yeah,
Or-
I'll tell you, there's on Facebook, Sayegh for Assembly. On Twitter, it's Twitter at Sayegh 2018, and on and then also Instagram at Nader Sayegh for Assembly.
Okay.
So these are three sources, and you know, I have my law practice at 10 Palisade Avenue. Presently, my headquarters is there. It's in the heart of downtown Yonkers, and anyone that's interested can visit me at the law office, or
Do you have a campaign headquarters? Or
I
that's
have a campaign headquarters
Where's
at
that
10
located?
Palisade Avenue.
10 Palisade. There you go.
Yeah. So again, these are locations: Facebook, Sayegh for Assembly; Twitter at Sayegh 2018; and Instagram at Nader Sayegh for Assembly. So we welcome each and every person's input, and you know, we have good, effective listening skills, and we understand people have different opinions. And my job was to listen to what the concerns are and use our experience to get people together, because at the end of the day, you got to do what's good for Yonkers. You know, the days of partisan politics, you know, is good when you're running for election and primaries, But then at the end of the day, you got to do what's right for your residents, because when I'm elected assemblyman, my goal is to represent every citizen in my assembly district.
Okay. Luis Cherico said, thank you for coming on and giving me a chance to get to know where you stand. Best wishes. I'll talk to my friends in Yonkers.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And for anyone who is tuned in on Facebook, I did take the moment to post the actual
There it is. I see it.
credentials, for your various sites. That reminds me of how much we miss one of our indispensable behind-the-scenes staff persons at this moment, Brenda.
Brenda.
Yes, wherever you're at, Brenda, we miss you.
I think she's on vacation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I'm gonna. Yay! Well, thank you so much for coming. It's good to see you, Nader. Thank you for coming. I wish you all the best.
And I apologize because I missed the previous engagement. There was a very important family event.
No worries.
But I'm glad I made it today, and I just want you to know I'm very concerned and very passionate about my community and very passionate about your efforts and the efforts of all of us that work together to really achieve success for all children and families. Thank you so much.
Dr. Bob, you had another question?
Yes, I do have a departing question, and it is a serious question and may take a moment for you to consider. Since I've become more actively involved in electoral politics, in particular, one of the pet peeves that I have had, and it's partly due to my scholarly studies, is the lack of competition within the Democratic Party itself. And the reason that I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, because it seems to me that one of the motivations for the complaints that are behind a lot of America's institutions, whether it be our educational system or our unions, is that there has been in the internal elite that has managed to consolidate and entrench its powers and is growing less and less responsive to the needs of everyday people that they represent. This is also true of the two-party system in the United States as a whole, which has been insulated from serious competition through a variety of means. But it also seems to be true of the Democratic Party in major cities, in cities where you have large populations of color, where Republicans can't compete at all because they have such backward policies.
True.
But the reason that I mention this is because in getting an update, I signed off for your petition, and one of the things I said to you is I'm giving you support. We hadn't met, so.
Sure.
But one of the things I said is that I want to see healthy competition in this primary season for the open seat that you're running for.
Mm-hmm.
And as Lorraine and I were sort of, going over our brief before the show, one of the things that she brought to my attention was that some of your competitors had been eliminated from the primary as a result of legal challenges. One of whom was here a couple of weeks ago, and I know I watched from home. I thought he did a fabulous job. He sounded also like a promising candidate. I know, of course, any court decisions that redound to you that you benefit from in some respects are welcome because you want to win office.
Mm-hmm.
But I would imagine that many of our viewers feel a lot more ambivalent, that in some respects they do not want to see the elimination of inter-party competition. They want to see an increase so that we can be sure that we have good, effective candidates. And I want to ask you,
Sure.
Reforms that you propose to make for up in Albany for our state funding are, much needed.
Correct.
But another reform that we need, and this is a reform that has to be spearheaded by our local Democratic Party leaders, is reforms to the party system so that we can have genuine, healthy competition to ensure that we're reviewing the full range of policies. And I want to know, have you and other members of the local Democratic Party leadership given any thought to reforms that can be made so that those of us who really want to get out here and do the hard work, grassroots work, can feel good at the end of the day that it was a fair, open primary and that we've gotten the best possible candidate that we can.
No, it's a good question, and you know, I'm an advocate of the Democrat process,
Right.
and the Board of Elections and state and local election laws are very clear. And when we look at reforms, and we should look at methods and ways to encourage greater voter participation and to make early voting and other requirements that make it easier to vote. I think, you know, that's a crucial area, and any attempts to try to discourage people from voting we should work against, and I will work against it. The establishment of guidelines, for example, in my assembly race, the Board of Elections requires 500 valid Democrat signatures to sign someone's petition to allow that person to go before the voters and say, hey, I have the support of my party, I'm eligible to enter a primary. That process assures that there isn't so many individuals that are not deserving.
Right.
For example, I would encourage many of our potential candidates, and this is a lesson to be learned, that if you're interested in seeking public office, I would encourage you to serve whatever political party you'd like to be involved. But in my case, as a Democrat, I would encourage these individuals join the establishment. There's many opportunities to serve as a district leader. Go out, work for candidates, carry petitions. For example, Yonkers, in this assembly district, there was nearly 36,000 Democrat voters. 36,000. So when you tell someone, if you're deserving and you're involved and you're active, go out and get 500 valid Democrats.
And they couldn't do it?
And they couldn't do it.
That,
you know what
if
the
you
concern
can't get
is?
500 signatures out of 30,000,
Now,
that's
when
embarrassing.
When I went to your home and got your signature, I had a list of all.
And you were there on a Sunday, I
Yeah,
think.
and I went to Runyon Heights, and I had a list of all registered Democrats. So I know they're registered, up-to-date Democrats, and I went door to door and made sure registered Democrats. When individuals go out that don't know the process, don't know how it works efficiently, and they go to train stations or they go to ShopRite or some local store, and anybody that walks by them, please sign my petition, and you find that nearly a third to half of those are not registered Democrat, then that does an injustice to the Democrat Party. If you're a Democrat voter and someone is getting signatures that amounts to half of them that are either not registered or registered with other political parties or not even registered in your district, you would get upset. And my concern is there's a process in place, learn the process, be involved, serve as a district leader, work with candidates, so when you go before the Democratic Party or other parties you seek their endorsement, you tell them this is why I deserve your support. And when you have an established support base like I did, the Democrat Party establishment, that was something I welcomed. I worked with the many wonderful ward leaders and district leaders. I had early on, the first thing I did was for district leaders a meet and greet at my house where I met the district leaders, I gave them information, we spoke about their issues, their concerns, mine, and we interlinked together. And that's what I built my campaign on. So I put out a message to all my opponents that our main target at this point is the November election, to take that seat away from the Republicans, because we got to be unified. We got to make sure that the primary process took place, the petition process took place. Now it's the time that we got to focus, we got to join together, we have common interests, common concerns, and we need to focus on November 6th. That's when the general election. We want that seat to stay a Democrat seat. We don't want that seat to turn a Republican seat. And if we have disenchanted movements and efforts that really split us up, then that's the worst thing that can happen. So I welcome my opponents, come on board, join the committee, let's work together, and who knows, these same opponents can bring a lot to the table, but I would encourage them to get involved with government, with process, with the community, and who knows what their opportunities would be moving forward.
Right. I believe that the Democratic Party is going to be a lot stronger when reforms are made that doesn't lead to widespread feelings of discontent. However, I agree. You know, we got an election to worry about in November, and so I will take the appropriate action myself.
Well, I got to bring in our next guest.
Yes.
You're welcome to stay if you want, Nader.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it again, and looking forward to another appearance, hopefully.
Okay. Oh, all
Yeah,
right.
so,
You
yes.
heard it here first.
Yeah. And I love, that's a very, very good newsletter, by the way. If anybody hasn't seen it, Black Westchester, People Before Politics. So it's a great source of information and news, and make sure you get your hands on it. Thank you.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming by the studio, joining us to make sure that our audience is informed about your candidacy, and we wish you well. Yes. in
Thank
your
you
bid.
very much.
And, you know, as it turns out, I will be casting my vote for you for a Democrat. Yes.
Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one. As we're waiting for our next guest to come on the set, I want to give a shout out to a couple of people who recently joined us. Kevin Bunch joined us. Give a shout out to Kev. My man Anthony Old School Mitchell is on the check-in as well. I know there are others who have joined us, and I don't see your names. That's because I can't really seem to get my Facebook page to work all that well. So, yeah. In any case, as we're waiting for our next guest to appear, perhaps we'll begin to take some steps to have Joe Pinion send an invitation to Joe Pinion, the Republican candidate, for the seat that we were discussing earlier, come into the studio, and perhaps him and Nader Sage are going to have an opportunity to talk to one another.
Ladies and gentlemen, our new, well, let's just very quickly, Dark Gable said what's up. We call him Dr. Bob. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine that I've known for many years as well. I really look up to him. I really do. That's weird for me to say. But I do look up to him, and I'm proud to be his friend because this guy wears so many hats. He's just amazing. So many hats that I'd rather ask him to tell us exactly what all his titles are because they're very impressive. And ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Anthony Mele. Tell us, Anthony, what are some of your you have to be close to the mic to speak. What are some of the titles that you hold, some of the hats that you wear?
Well, thank you, Lorraine. My best title is the one that you said, your friend.
Oh, gee. Oh, Chuck.
That's a really good title.
Don't blush on us now.
My aspiring title is King of the World. I'm working on it. But yes, professionally, I'm president of AMI Global Security. So that's my security consulting company. We're international consultants. We're defense contractors, United Nations vendors, and consultants in the areas of counterterrorism and security. And politically, I was just elected last month or so as the state chair of the Latino National Republican Coalition.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, so that's talk about being a minority in a minority. How you like that one? So that's one. So we're doing very well. We're building coalitions. We're building bridges. We're spreading understanding, and what we're looking for is commonality. And we believe that, and I truly believe, and I'm sure you do as well, that we don't have to have shared ethnicities to have shared principles.
Yeah.
And so the more that we bring in, the more understanding that we have, we can, we can advance together for the common good.
Excellent. Well, before we proceed, I did notice that our co-host, Damon Jones, just logged in, and so we want to give D a
Hey,
shout.
Damon.
All right, and yes. So Lorraine, you can continue.
Oh,
Yes, thank you.
now, of all of those hats that you wear, I want to talk about a little bit about each of them. But first, let's start with the which one would you like to start with?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't add one that's very near and dear that you know that you and I both been working on for a long time, and that's as an advocate for veterans issues, and I'm the chairman since 1999 of the 65th Infantry Borinqueniers Honor Task Force, which brings recognition and help bring recognition to some of our forgotten heroes, among them from the Korean War, specifically the 65th Infantry Regiment of Puerto Rico, known as the Borinqueniers, whose distinction is not just their ethnicity, but their valor and gallantry in the field of battle during the Korean War, where they conducted what became the last battalion-sized bayonet charge in American military history, which is legendary. It not only won them the respect of their peers, their superiors, but even the enemy. The enemy even bowed to them. And up to this day, we've been working very hard to do recognition for them and to raise public awareness. And we proudly can announce that they are the recipients of the highest award that the people of the United States can bestow, which is the Congressional Gold Medal. And we just
That's awesome.
that.
Yes,
Excellent.
yes, yes.
And
Good
then-
for you. Good for you. And thank you, sir. Thank you for that.
And now what we like to do is one of the things that brings me here to this audience. Please check out our Facebook page at 65th Infantry Honor Task Force. And what we want to do now is that the North Koreans are repatriating very subtly, very cool. It's diplomatic. It has to be done with panache. You know what I mean? It's nothing this is not one of those things that you have to make big splash about. It's not. It's an Asian mentality. If you understand the Far East, or the Orient mentality. So they're doing it with honor. They're honoring their word. I can report that they're honoring their word and that they're delivering these repatriated unknown soldiers with respect.
They just delivered 55, right?
55.
Yeah.
And there's more coming.
Wow.
And they're doing it quietly. They're doing it very subtly, and we want that to continue. We don't want anything to upset that. So, part of what we're doing is, when we're looking for public support about, is that it's a soldier thing, but we want to. I'm organizing to bring some veterans of the Korean War and from some of the last of the Borinqueniers to the repatriation site when they bring the caskets or off of the plane and repatriate them on American soil, to be there to greet them. You see, these soldiers not only gave up their lives, sir, but they gave up their identity. I mean, we don't know who they are.
Wow.
But we do know percentage-wise that at least 3% of the 7,000 were Borinqueniers, and 5% of those were at least Latinos. So out of those 55, 3% and there were likely Borinqueniers, and another 5% are Latinos. So it's a thing of honor. It's something inexplicable. It doesn't have to be explained to veterans or warriors, and you can never explain it to someone who doesn't want to understand it. But just to be there when they arrive, to greet them and render a hand salute as they arrive, is something that we're working towards now.
That's pretty special.
Yeah. And so we're just trying to raise money for the expenses, plane ticket, hotel, and bring them back. So that's on our Facebook page, 65th Infantry Honor Task Force. That's it.
Okay.
Now tell us a little bit more about your other hats.
Okay. On the professional side, AMI Global Security, it's something that I've been doing for quite some time now. I'm a United States Army veteran.
Thank you for serving, sir.
Thank you. I served in the 3rd United States Infantry, the Old Guard, which is the Presidential Honor Guard at Fort Myer. They're the guys who, among other things, who provide the sentinels at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And among other things, so I served very proudly there in the infantry. And then I moved on into the intelligence field and worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, the Intelligence and Security Command, the United States military training mission to Saudi Arabia, in Saudi Arabia, training Saudis. And then I was elevated to the Office of the Chief of Staff for Intelligence at the Pentagon. And then I transitioned to civilian world, where I started my company and provided executive VIP protection to diplomats and high-ranking persons in the intelligence community.
Mm.
It's taken me around the world. I've set foot and worked over the years, and I think the last count was something like 50 countries. So I've been to a lot of places.
Wow.
Well, quite impressive. I have to say that your experience as a high-ranking member of our national intelligence community necessarily invites questions about your views on the current controversy that we're now having over the Mueller investigation of possible Russian meddling, if not collusion, in the Trump election. And it is very commonplace for at least the most outspoken Republican figures today to lambast and discredit the investigation on the allegation that this is nothing but a conspiracy on the part of the defense intelligence community to rob President Trump of his legitimate election victory. And I'm curious to know, as a former professional, what do you make of the, disbelief that has been voiced about the legitimacy of the investigation?
Well, look. Of course, I have a learned opinion on it, a learned viewpoint, and then there's the political observation.
Right.
Obviously, those who are against the current administration will say and do anything against it, no matter what the truth is.
Mm-hmm.
And then those who are involved in trying to remove and prevent the presidency were involved in what can be scholastically and academically described as an American attempt at a coup, which were high-ranking members who were, remember, they're political hacks. We're not talking about the community, we're talking about the appointees. So those appointees were the director of FBI, director of DOJ, director of, who was the other guy? CIA, director of this, director of that. They all had a political thing, so they're political hacks. And they had the levers of power. This all occurred during the Obama administration. Evidence is overwhelming evidence is already pointing out to that this was basically a farce. There were when I went to go vote, there were no Russians in the voting booth with me. So, the only Russian thing I know is Russian dressing. And now, that's about it. And that's really the truth of the matter. So the politics is just kind of really parochial at this point in time. And now, from the defense intelligence and security point, I'll share this with you in the audience. Violating security clearances is very serious business. It has nothing to do with politics. You're talking about compromising intelligence assets and people who really got their neck on the line, people who are embedded in other countries, people who we train, people who we pay, people who we've turned, who are embedded, providing us, raw intelligence. Mm-hmm. There's only a few people in the room. So a counterintelligence or counter-espionage expert, just by hearing some of the information that's been leaked, for instance, can reverse engineer it and immediately say it was Lorraine.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it probably was Lorraine.
I
joke. But what I'm saying is,
chances are was.
She gonna give me some of that money after the show.
but I was joking. But you follow
Yes.
what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take much for a counter-espionage. We're talking espionage now, gentlemen.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking politics at this time. I'm talking espionage and counter-espionage. Okay.
Right.
So this is very, very serious stuff. Very serious stuff. So we're looking at compromise of our cyber systems. The way our cyber systems were when we backtrack on it we find out that that there were people who were embedded, for instance, in the DNC, who compromised that. We realized that obviously, you're not security experts here, right? But you do know you don't put top secrets on Google, right? You do know you don't put top secrets on a home server, in the basement of the thing what Hillary was doing. If anyone with the clearances I held, and let me tell you the kind of clearances I held top secret, SCI, sensitive compartmented intelligence. We're talking about the highest clearances that the nation could bestow. There's a high degree of trust. High degree of trust. Okay? I still know things today I cannot divulge. Okay?
Can imagine,
by honor. And oath.
I like that, by honor and oath.
Yeah, honor and oath. By honor and oath. You can't do that. So for someone of that rank, as a Secretary of State, former First Lady of the state of Arkansas, former U.S. Senator, there is no excuse. She knows what a violation of security clearance is, okay? And to feign ignorance is an insult. Also, it's a federal crime. Any one of us or anyone who held any kind of clearance did something like that, man, I cannot even begin to explain to you how fast they will swoop down and snatch you up. And because you have to turn around and do something that's called damage control, sir. All right? So you understand? So this is beyond politics. Now we have to go back and find out, holy moly, did something that was leaked divulge where SEAL Team 6 was going to be, on what Chinook they were going to be, what time it was taken off, what was their path, and if somebody was in the right place at the right time with the SA-7 shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile can blow them out of the sky and wipe them out. And that's what happened. So did it happen because somebody was in the right place at the right time with the right weapon in the right situation who knew they were coming to be there? Or was it just a fluke? Or do we know that intelligence that we are receiving is not false intelligence? So because they know the sources of the intelligence that we are receiving, now they turn around and say, okay, we know, we now feed them false intel. All right, and now policymakers are making mistakes and false mistakes, and so therefore you have a destruction of foreign policy, you have a destruction of military policy, you have a destruction of national security policy that compounds. This is very, very serious stuff. So of course, if someone along the chain of command or someone in that circle were involved to that level and deeply, of course they're going to do everything they can to cover it up and shift blame. Look, kids do it. When the milk is spilled, they never say, I did it. They say the dog did it. Right? So, of course, people at this level are going to do everything they can to shift blame. So sometimes we have to filter out the propaganda, we have to filter out the falsehoods, and really get the truth of the matter. But that's if the truth matters to you. If the truth doesn't matter, then this is just an academic exercise. But if you ask me a question about security issues as serious as national security, intelligence security, asset protection, if we release by mistake the identity of an asset is an undercover spy. That's called an asset. So rather than say undercover spy, just asset. Okay?
Right.
So if we divulge the identity of an asset or a source could be an asset who doesn't know he's an asset. A source could be somebody that when he drinks, he spills the beans, or that there's some kind of surveillance on him, and that he's sloppy about security. And or we have a backdoor pass into his computer, right? So if we turn around and compromise that, man, I can't tell you the ramifications that does of the dangers that put people in. So when they turn around and I go to you and I try to recruit you, you're going to tell me, Tony, you crazy? Your first lady over here put everybody's name. They got everybody's name of everybody's asset, national operations asset list that the CIA has, top secret names, and it's all over the thing. Everyone has them. The Chinese have them. All of our enemies have them. I'm not joining you guys. You guys are nuts. You see? So it creates all of these other problems. And I brought up SEAL Team 6 for a reason. If you can remind your viewers about that, SEAL Team 6 is like the elite of the elite, right? These are our baddest guys, right? These are guys in a moment's notice, go down, knock on Osama bin Laden's door, say hello, please come with us, or you don't want to come with us, and they shoot him in the face 5 times, right? Okay.
a guess. Your
Is
description.
that what happened?
That's about what happens.
Oh, snap.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because I'm in the counterterrorism and the anti-terrorism faction, right? So counterterrorism is tracking them, anti-terrorism is whacking them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when we turn around and have guys who are trained with those kind of skills, those kind of assets, those millions of dollars that are invested in them, and then somehow someone reveals that they will be departing point A at a certain amount of time on a chopper or a Chinook that flies at a certain speed, top speed, down a certain route, right? And that if you happen to be in a certain place at a certain time with a certain weapon that can see over the horizon and blow them out of the sky, this is serious. This is a serious compromise. So to turn around and tell us that SEAL Team 6 got blown out of the sky by some jihadi who woke up to smoke a cigarette and happened to have a shoulder-fired grenade launcher and hit what's the equivalent of a Mack truck in the sky with a pea shooter, equivalent of a pea shooter that flies like a bottle rocket. That story is just not believable.
Right.
So I understand that you have to make a cover story because you don't want to say the truth of the matter, but that one's just not palatable. So this brings why the seriousness of that level of compromise is not a joke, not to be played, politicized or played politics with. And of course, if people at the highest levels who are being, who this is leading to, unfortunately, are involved, which they were because they had the clearances and these things did happen on their watch, right? Of course, it doesn't seem far-fetched for them to turn around and point the fingers and distractions and diversions to others when they themselves were guilty as sin on some of the most fundamental security violations, which is protect your clearance. You know, you don't put top secrets on Google. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. You've made very clear. I mean, I should say that our audience members know that generally I have been a fiery critic of the Trump administration and its what we know of its relationship with Russian operatives during the 2016 presidential election. But I don't think there's no way that you and I, of course, could wade through all of the data that's relevant to this to try to figure out,
There's a
proof
lot of
and
mud in the
falsehoods.
water.
Right.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of mud in that water.
But since we're on the topic, I mean, I will ask, are you concerned, however, as a longstanding member of a Republican policy outfit, are you concerned about the Republican Party's historic reversal of its strong foreign policy stance, especially with respect to Russia? Because it seems like in the effort to uncover the truth and figure out which of the two competing versions of the truth is to be believed, Republicans have taken a number of extraordinary steps that I would say have also compromised the security of the U.S., specifically, for example, with the revelations of the FISA warrant, the FISA application that was released to the public, certainly leads to the possibility that you could reverse engineer from information given to...
The FISA warrant, that's another story. And you're right, there's a lot of mud in this water. So basically to condense it without eating up too
right,
much of your
'cause
time,
we don't
'cause
want
there's a few
to.
other things
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
like
yeah, of course.
because we're not going to find a conclusion
No,
here
that's right.
until the end of the
Right,
investigation.
we're not the investigators.
Right. So but what we can do is kind of condense it to what makes sense. Okay, and so this is what makes sense. All right, and this is not talking political.
Yeah,
Now I'm talking as things. So let me break it down into a few little things. First of all, I also hold a master's degree in diplomacy and international conflict management, and another degree in international relations and counterterrorism. I also graduated Defense Intelligence College, in the realm of counterterrorism, counterespionage, and secure of information. So I kind of have some training,
Right.
a little bit, on this particular thing. So now, on foreign policy, foreign policy is fluid, not concrete, right? Because situations change, right?
Sure.
So to turn around and say, oh, well, that was a foreign policy 20, well, you know, it's not concrete. It's fluid, changes, things change, right? You want change. You want things to stay all the same exactly. So what would be better to have, what would create a peace dividend economically and for long term? The United States and Russia working together, doing business together, have business diplomacy, whereas we open up our markets, they open up their markets, and we're doing business with each other, and their business communities are becoming enriched and creating wealth among those populations. I'm talking about the business community population, right? You know, the rank and file people,
Yeah.
right? All of a sudden, mixradio.com is playing in Russia, and you know you're getting advertisers, you're making money, right?
Right.
Okay. So countries who are making money off each other and becoming wealthy from each other very rarely drop thermonuclear bombs and obliterate each other. Okay. So right. Then there's also the humanitarian level. Then there's also which would be better, to have a humanitarian cooperation with Russia and the United States, or not having a Russian humanitarian effort between them? Can you imagine the Russian military and the American military? Russian medical and science people and American medical and science researchers working together, researching together, working in space together. Imagine this. It'd be a dividend, right? So there's always been, as you know, and you probably realize this too, there's always the thing of creating the boogeyman. Yeah, how can you justify $1 trillion military budget if there's not a boogeyman to scare the bejesus out of you with? Right? So, you know, so the military-industrial complex, of which I am a part, understands this, right? So so there has to be measures and countermeasures. So just as there are opponents and such within Russia who would not like to see a cooperation between the United States and Russia, there are elements within the United States that would not like to see a cooperation between the two. But we might have reached that point in history where we have two leaders of these two top thermonuclear countries, you know, in the world, who are traditional or long-standing opponents, starting to realize that maybe we need to find some common ground. This is diplomacy. And if they reach a diplomatic, we don't have to, you know, jump in bed with each other, I'm talking about. But we can do business. We can arrive at some diplomatic cooperation. This is not a bad thing. Now, what has history shown us? In World War I, who was an ally with the United States against the Kaiser and those powers? Russia.
Presumably Russia.
Russia. And in World War II?
Russia.
Russia. Okay. You see? And then there was a long-standing Cold War. The Soviet Union collapsed. The Soviet satellites collapsed. Now we just have Russia. But you ever look at Russia on the map? I tell your friends looking on online now, get Russia on the map and take a look on the map. You can see that Russia begins from Eastern Europe, wraps all the way around the planet, all right, and stops across the street from Alaska. All right? Now, we're talking about a huge landmass. Now, if Russia was walking down the street and the United States was walking down the street and they were coming out to each other, who in the world would say, hey, I want to pick a fight with that one guy? Maybe we should find a way to work together. So diplomatically speaking, as a diplomat, as a national security expert, and as a proponent of foreign policy, I would say that we need to find more areas of cooperation, more areas for humanitarian enterprise and business diplomacy, rather than go on a collision course of conflict. Not good.
AJ wants me. Do you have any question? Another question? You have a follow-up?
No.
Yes, you do.
No. We only have a few minutes left, so I don't want to get too
because
bogged
AJ
down.
wanted me to ask what it's like to be a Republican in Westchester in the Trump era.
Winning.
No. Hold on.
I thought I just teach you a little bit. I just want to have a little fun.
Oh, okay, all
I
right.
just have a little-
That was good. That was good.
It's all right,
I was like, hold on, what election are we? Local election, but in any case.
I'll just have a little fun with you.
No, that's fine, man. That's fine.
Look, I find it as a student of history and a student of politics, I find that actually we're living in fascinating times, man. This is like really something to really study. This is something that students and academics of politics and policy, economic policy, fiscal policy. Remember, there's a difference between fiscal policy and monetary policy, right? You know, we're seeing our money do things that it hasn't done in a long time. Flex a muscle. Pretty incredible stuff. 4.0 GDP, we'll take it. That's not bad. People's 401ks going up, more money in your pocket, not too shabby. A lot of regular
Gas is going up too.
well, that's going to fluctuate, but that's all going to disappear when we have the possibility of going to the moon, which the Trump administration has already announced to do, and we have the technology to do it with. I'll ask your people online to look up the element helium-3, H3, and find out that it's abundant on the moon, and helium-3 as an energy source. One shuttle bay full of helium-3 brought back to Earth can power Indian Point with clean energy for 100 years.
Wow.
We're talking about some amazing possibilities to go on, that can go on. Now remember, you know, I'm old enough to remember the moon race. Look what happened in leaps in technology, right? From 1900 to 1969, we went from the horse and buggy to man walking on the moon in 69 years. Computers, well, there was a time where NASA had rooms of computers. Now the same power computer is right here on your phone. So the leaps, see, technology doesn't evolve. Technology leaps. And if we start looking at a leap in technology, for instance, of getting elements from the moon, mining the moon. Did you know there's gold on the moon? Gold. There's gold on the moon. Helium-3 on the moon. There's water on the moon, which can make atmosphere. There's the moon is also believed to be cavernous. It's somewhat hollow. All right. So now we've only discovered and explored some things on the surface of the moon. Now geologists are having a field day trying to speculate. Can you imagine what the kind of geology they would find below the surface of the moon? Remember, you see all those pockmarks on the moon? If those happen by collisions, what was delivered to the moon?
Right.
So, like as I said, it's really a wonderful things of possibilities that can happen. If we take away some of the personality quirks that this particular president has, and start looking at basically just look at results. Some of the results are pretty fascinating and you know, not to be discounted, because it's really affecting people in a marvelous way as far as economics is concerned. The other thing is that from the political side of it, I had written an article when Trump first came on the scene before he was President Trump, and I analyzed it. And for those who just like to study this kind of stuff without having the emotions of, you know, political left, right, Republican or not, I described, I think pretty accurately. One thing I thought was pretty interesting, that Trump was arising as a populist. I called it from a long time ago. He wasn't coming as a Republican. He's a populist, and a populist really only comes in American history about 100 years. The last populist was Teddy Roosevelt, and they had a lot of similarities. Their own money, very rough, tough guys. One of the toughest tough guy presidents. Let's if you know what that
Sure.
was Roosevelt, right?
Sure.
Did you know that Teddy Roosevelt was the only president to receive the Medal of Honor?
I didn't realize.
I
But
just
know
said,
he
what
did
does
serve.
that have to do with being Latino Republican in Westchester in the Trump era?
Those are labels, my friend. I don't do labels. You know what I'm saying? Peaches have labels. Other things have labels. I don't need labels. I'm beyond labels. I don't self-identify as labels. I'm beyond, I believe in brain cells, not skin cells.
You want me to tell what I think what AJ was trying to say? I think I got us a little off course with my initial question
Oh, I'm sorry.
on foreign policy, which is a bit removed from the everyday concerns of our listeners. And I think what AJ wants to know is, really, you're here to tout the Republican program and its impact on Latinos especially, and, and why Latinos and others
Well, the reason why
need to take a second look.
Yeah, the reason why I have no qualms about it, to call it what it is, and Lorraine to tell you, I've been at war with the Republican Party and the people for a long time.
Yes,
So
he
I
has
don't-
no
I-
problem
Yeah,
with
I have
that.
no problem with that. So you're barking up the wrong tree here, because I've given political punch in the face more than once. Now, the thing is, there would be no reason for a Latino National Republican Coalition if the Republicans were doing a good job on attracting other people's through principles.
Right.
Now, culturally, what a lot of people don't realize is that the Latino culture as a culture, and I don't believe in self-segregating. I kind of take umbrage to that, and there's reasons to that. I've put some things to that, and it makes sense. But Latinos by culture are conservative. They believe in the church, right? They believe in church, really tight family orientation thing, okay? Work ethic, unbelievable work ethic. This is things that are almost entrenched in the DNA. It's a culture thing. You know, Christian church, right? Pentecostals. Look at Pentecostal Latinos. Forget about it, right?
We got 3 minutes.
Okay. So the thing is that the Latino culture is a right fit for the Republican plank, which is conservatism, individualism. The most endangered minority in the United States of America is the individual, and we believe in individualism, not collectivism, and that's the primary difference between us and them.
Well, Anthony, I would love to have you come back if AJ agrees with that. I would love to have you come back and so that we can discuss Hispanic Republican issues.
As you like.
You want me to tell what? Because we really didn't have enough time in this segment.
I only answered your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man.
No. It was a wonderful conversation.
But it deserves that we revisit the topic.
Definitely would love to have you back so that we can continue the conversation. Very quickly, tell the audience how they can reach you if they want to reach you, if they have any questions or anything, or just want to be friends or want to join the Latino Hispanic Republicans, which I would love to, by the way. Hispanic Republicans. How can they reach you?
Just look up my name, Anthony Mele, M-E-L-E, with an accent on the E. My telephone number is 914-329-0338. On Facebook, you find me on Facebook. On the Facebook, we have our Facebook page on the National Republican Latino Coalition. But if you find my name, it'll link up to all of that. And then also, guys, we really got to find more ways of that we agree with. We have to find more ways of uniting than dividing each other. And we have to turn around and get away from this things of labels. There are no minorities. Okay, minority comes from the word means less than. Okay, I am not less than anyone else. So if you consider yourself less than because of your skin color, all right, then you're right. But if you let others tell you that you're less than because of your skin color, they're wrong. In our political system, we all get one vote. And my one Latino vote, or one black vote, or one Asian vote, or one any other vote is no less than anyone else's vote. We all get one vote.
That's right.
So if we begin to vote more by shared principles than shared ethnicities, we can get a lot more done. And I like to find ways for us to unite on things of commonality, things that will uplift rather than divide us.
Right, and I would agree that principled alliances are of the utmost importance and ones that we need to work on. And partly that's why we are so appreciative that Lorraine had you come on the show, man. Because it's not too often that we get representatives
a different
from
perspective.
That's right. I mean, you know.
Go ahead, represent.
No, I'm just. I happen to be a registered Democrat, but we do want to be sure to have as inclusive a discussion as possible. And so we really do thank you for coming on.
Thank you for your courtesy.
Absolutely.
And I hope I wasn't. I was trying to be informative, just so your audience would
know. Oh, you were very, very informative. It was a wonderful conversation.
Teaching moment.
Right.
I wasn't trying to impose my opinion.
No. Listen, the audience appreciated it, and I think AJ said that's one of Bob's guests. He liked this stuff.
Yes, he did. He said Bob is going to love it. And I said it too. I said, wait till Dr. Bob meets him. We're done. We're over. Oh. How many minutes do we have left? A second? There you go. Say your
okay,
goodbyes,
everyone. Well, you could have been doing anything else, but you decided to be with us. And so we thank you very much for joining People Before Politics. Tune in every Sunday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. I am your guest co-host, Robert Baskerville, filling in for A.J. Woodson, Damon Jones, and on behalf of the lovely Lorraine Lopez, peace. We'll see y'all next week.
Peace, folks.
22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.